Okay, so Zok to Gemara on Daf Kuf Zayin Amral Itmar. So once again, we're talking about a Yerusha that was split, and then it turned out that there's a problem, and therefore it has to be revised. So what does the Gemara say? Itmar Achin shecholku ubabal choiv v'notal chelko shel echad men. Brothers split a Yerusha 50-50, and then a balchoiv of the fathers who had a sheep properties came and took the if you find, I'll give half to my brother the other half. That it was going to go to the Bachai. But there's a whole discussion about Arvis and how Arvis works, because the property is really could a co say, no, I'm not paying in the Gemara's times. There was a discussion, I guess, where it wasn't spoken out explicitly. So Rav Amar Batal Machloikis, basically they throw everything back into the pot, whatever's remaining after the Shmuel Amar Viter. Shmuel's the person whose property got seized loses out, and the other does not have to compensate. But the way smaller is that a half made, and that will be. Sorry, he only has to. He doesn't get a. He gets a. He gets a. He doesn't get half of what his brother got left with. Because if his property was totally taken away, he doesn't get half of his brother's property. He gets a quarter of his brother's property. But his brother has a choice to either give him land or to pay him off of cash. Let's see if we could understand why. When brothers split their Yorshim, meaning he holds Pashas, it's working with Yesh Brera, and what each brother got, we say they were always destined to get. And therefore, the person whose property was taken, it's too bad for him. And that's why Rav says, Rav says, the opposite. Since we each got what we're always destined to get, and each of our halakim are equally liable to pay off the chayv, we have to start over again because we were both liable for that chayv. Shmuel Amar Viter, he holds no, the person whose property was taken is too bad for him. Why? Because he doesn't hold the favor, and therefore he holds every chalukah we view as if it was a purchase and sale. Because whatever I was destined to get that you have now, it's like I sold it to you in exchange for what you were destined to get that I ended up taking. So Viter, Kasover but it's like lekech shaloi b'chayis. And the Rashbam explains, when brothers want to split up, they want to be completely separate from one another. Normally, when you buy a priest, we say by default, pay money, and you wanted unencumbered property. So there's an agreement between us. There's an implied agreement between us that whatever happens to your property, I will never be responsible for, and in exchange for. So what happened? I got this property. My brother got that property. The Balchav took away my property. Too bad, because that was the deal that we won't be responsible. Rav Asi misafkala. He wasn't sure. So therefore, it's mamona mutul besofik. Whether or not you have to give me half of your remaining property is a suffix. Do you paskin like Rav or do you paskin like Shmuel? What do you do? And the halach is either bekaka or revia. It doesn't mean both. It means one or the other. He have to give me property itself. The teretz is because he could say, when the Bachayv came, you didn't have to give him property. You could have put him off. I would have paid him. I'm going to pay off as well. It's not my fault to pay off. There's differently mechuyev to pay half because he's mesuvik if it's ikiyar shenhava, and then we reevaluate, or if it's kalachuchas, but it will be kalachuchas with achrayas, and therefore for sure you have to give me half of the remaining property. But if it's kalachuchas, you could pay me that off with, you cannot pay me off with money, you have to pay me off with cash, or with karka, and therefore you have to give me half. However, you don't have to give it all in property, since it's a suffix that it could be l'kuchos b'achrais, you can pay me off in cash. Amar Rav Papa, hilchos of the halacha is b'chol hanishmaitza, meaning not only in this halacha, but in the halacha where two brothers split up, and it turns out that there was a third brother there, in that case as well, mikamtzin. We don't the chalukah, each person gives in a little bit. No, that's not how we pass it. We pass it batal machlokes because it's kiyar shendam. The hilchasa, and how do we pass it? Batal machlokes, which is like that. Tanar batal shloisha shiyar dulishu. Normally, when Bezdin has to assess a property, there's not one individual independent appraiser. It's always a team of three. One said this property is worth a mana. This is worth 2 mana. Or what if one of the team said Masayim Ushnaim Arim B'mana? Allah is Batul Yachid Bimi Utai. You go boss to the rabbim and you say that the evaluation is what the two people claimed against the single guy. Well, what if it was a three-way split? Echad B'mana. Mana is 100 dinar. The echad, the 20 slot, 80 dinar. So we're moving back from this in dinar esrim, which would be esrim sloim, which would be 80 dinar, right? Split one that came up the middle and said it's 100. What do you do? Nidain b'mana. We go up the middle. Nidain b'shishim. B'tishim will be 90, which means halfway in between the lowest two assessors. You know what you do? You look at the total spread. The total spread is 40, right? From 80 to 120. You take a third of that total spread, which would be 13 and a third, and you add that to the lowest bidder, and you get, instead of 80 dinar, you get 93 and a third. So we're going to need an understanding of where these three opinions came from. You go up the middle. And the Rashbam explains, what does it mean you go up the middle? Very, very simple. Both agree that it's not 120. Both agree that it's not 80. So therefore, you settle at 100. So it's not because 100's in the middle. What if the guy in the middle said 110? Or if he said 97? Neither betishim. Why betishim? Because so the first sheet holds that nobody made a mistake. There's three opinions, and therefore you go bust to the right. The second two opinions that we're about to discuss holds people, even though they really agree on the assessment, they could be off by a little bit. So Kosovar, really everybody holds Ira this is worth 90. Esrim, so what 10, he could undervalue. He undervalued it by 10. So really, the high the Kalmar the guy who said 100, he also was a little bit off, and he overevaluated a little bit. He overvalued it. Now, clearly, we're totally ignoring the third guy who said 120. We're sort of making a compromise between the two lowest guys. Why would you do that? Maybe high ira may have the Esther Shavya. Maybe you do the same split, but you do it on the high end. Maybe it's really worth 110. The person who said mana, he's the one who undervalued. He overvalued by 10. Let's stick to the first two. They don't take it, no one considers it a mana or higher. The Rashbam explains it's simple as tafasta meruba loy tafasta. If you have a choice of saying it's worth less or more, tafasta meruba loy tafasta. That's why you always focus on the lower end. The same idea, but he doesn't split it the same way. So what does that mean? Like we said earlier, you take a third of the spread, which is 13 and a third, and that's what you add to the lowest number. So you're going to end up paying not 90 like the last time, but 93 and a third is what we're going to evaluate it. Why? Because that's what it's really worth. The lipper, high the comer esrim, the one who said it was only worth 80, he undervalued it by this 1/3 of the spread. The problem is, by the comer mana, that's more. I'm sorry, a mana is only 6 and a third, 6 and 2/3 away that they're each making a mistake in 13 and a third, then the guy should have said mana, he should have had a little bit of a higher evaluation. By the cover mana, katoi, tleisar, betilsa lakame. Uvedinat limit. Really, he should have said 106 and 2/3. If in fact that's the spread on what time it can make a mistake. By the Kamar, you know why I didn't do it? Because he didn't want to break the barrier of 100. Savar mistoy, I'm afraid the kamatfina kula high achavroy. I'm afraid to go more than 100, which is 20 away from my friend. So basically, being I know that the other guy's opinion is so far from mine, even though I feel it might be worth more, I'm only going to say that because I feel uncomfortable claiming that it's so much more away from my friend. Frank more Adarabba. Why don't you look at it from the other direction? Why did you do the same calculation with the two higher ones? Ha'arya mea utleiser utlosa shavya, and Haida Kamermana katoi tleiser utlosa lachayra. He's undervaluing it by 13 in the third. But Haida Kamer shloishim, and the guy who said it's 120, toi tleiser v'tilsa lakamei. So he should have went over 120. He should have said over the Kamer tfei. Same story. Sabar mistoi. I can't go over 120 if you said 100. You always go with the two lower ones that were valued, similar to the same svar we said before. And you say tefas tamaruba lo tefas.
What happened to the first guy came in at 120? And
that's a very, very good question. That's an excellent question. So let's look at the Rashbam. I wish I would have had you with me as we were learning, because then the Rashbam would have been a scratch to an inch. I didn't chap that. So I read the Rashbam and say, what's the Rashbam talking about? And then I had to figure out that. So look at the Rashbam says. The very first wide line in the Rashbam. The Shavit Tveiman of a Shisha dinner. Then you'd gimbal a really, he should have been over 100. The Haidla Yamar, he doesn't feel comfortable evaluating something that's more than 20 higher than what his friend. So here's the Rashbam asking your question. We don't know. Before they come out with their official evaluation, they actually discuss it amongst themselves. And then each one expresses his opinion after the discussion. So first they have a discussion, then they have a vote. And therefore, everybody already knows what the other guy's thinking, even before he actually makes his formal vote. Then he knew that what his friend was going to say, even if he spoke first. So he actually discusses directly your side. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Omer Avuna halacha ka'acherim. We paskin like acherim. which is the most complicated version. 13 and third. Amar Bashi, time of that I don't understand the svara. He obviously didn't like this svara. Hilchas of didn't kavasayu. How can I pass if I don't like it? Tonu or Kubi thought Tonu because the Yonei Goyla or Shmuel and Karna, which are not Tanoim, so it doesn't make sense that it should be Mishnah. Oishin Shuma Benem Shalson. Amar Vuna Hilchas of the Yonei Goyla. Amar Bashi, the same thing. Time of the Yonei Goyla Adinan. Hilchas of didn't kavasayu. How can I possibly like the I don't understand. I don't accept the calculation. I'm selling you a half of my field. The halach is mishamnin beinei, and we're going to see what that means. It doesn't literally mean that you cut the field in half. Okay. Detail. He said, I'm selling you the Schelik and Dor. Who Mekabel Olav. Now, when you sell me the whole property, then I have to make a gate around my own property. But if you're selling me part of your property, we have to create fences for Who Mekabel of Mokim Ageder, Charitz of Encharitz. They would create a very strong security perimeter. There was first a barrier, and then they had two ditches, a big ditch and a small ditch. And the Gemara is going to explain how that was configured. The Chamahu Charitz, Shisha Tvachim, that's 6 Tvachim wide, I believe. Uven Charitz is only 3 Tvachim wide. So there was 2 trenches built around the perimeter. When we say you split the property, we don't really split it evenly, where we each get equal portions of the better part of the property and the equal portions of the worst part of the property. No, I only get the Lakech only gets the worst part of the property. And how is it? How does it work? The way it works is we, for Taich's words, that when you say Chatzi Sad Ani Moichalach, it's always Yahar Lakech Latach. Whatever is clear from those words, Lakech Clay. But you get an equal part of this. It also mean the property is evaluated at $1 million. I'm giving you from this property $500,000 worth of land. I can give him only the shvacha part. Of course, if I give him the shvacha part, I have to give him more because I did say I'm going to give you $500,000 worth of land. So the Mishamnim means that I can give you the shvacha part of the land, but it will have to be worth $500,000, and that's what I meant by chatzi, half of the value. So you'll get a bigger part. You'll end up rather have a smaller piece of property that's fertile, good land, versus a larger property that wasn't such good land. I'm sorry. Well, it's that's the thing. It's a suffix. When someone says chatzi something in the lakeach can't prove, it means we're literally splitting it in half. And since he can't prove it, it's yodel tachtoina, and it's most advantageous for the moicher to keep the most fertile portions of the property. So that's exactly what the shayla is. So how could you say that? And that seems to mean that we split it equally. We figure this out. So Rabbi Yochanan answered back, while you were indulging in delicacies in Bavel, Targimna, we were hodoving to understand Pshat in the Mishnah. And the reason why we're adamant about this Pshat is because it's clear from the Sefer of the Mishnah, if you analyze it, that that's what it must mean. Why? The Katani Sefer, Chetzi B'Dorim Ani Moichalach B'Shamnin B'Neim. The Noitel Chetzi B'Dorim. There, I specified which part of the property I want, the southern part. So the way you understood it, that I'm giving you actual property, what's the Mishamnin? I told you I'm giving you the southern part. That's what I'm giving you. There's nothing to be Mishamin. There's nothing to adjust. But my Mishamnin B'Neim. He was quite clear which part of the property he was giving him. Ella, what does it mean? You touch up that it's L'Dmei. When I said I'm giving you the southern part of the property, what I said was evaluate what the southern part of the property is worth, and whatever it's worth, I'm going to give you a piece of property that I will pick that represents that. So what we're saying is maybe money value, not necessarily referring to what part of the property is giving it. So therefore, in the Sefer, it must be that way, because otherwise, what's the Mishamnin? It's clear cut. You give him what he said. Elamai, you don't give him the Durham side. All he meant to say is, I'm evaluating the value of the Durham side. And let's say that's $600,000. So I'm giving him $600,000 for the property, but I can pick which part of the property I want to give. So if it means like that when he specified, surely it means like that at the beginning. So you have your barrier, then another perimeter of a small trench, and then there's another perimeter of a large trench. They're both on the outside of the perimeter of the fence, not within the perimeter. Why? Why do you do? What's the security system? Koifetis. The cannot jump over. If you have a treasure 6 tvachim wide, that'll keep him away. Why do you need to make charitz? So I need a ravach since it's that wide. 6 tvachim. We're afraid the animals make only a small charitz that an animal couldn't get into. So tomorrow, no, I need a cotton. Since it's small, kaima as for so therefore you have and then have between the two trenches, one tefa. There are certain relationships, like a father and a son, where if the son dies, the father yashins him, and if the father dies, the son yashins. So there are such relationships. Then there are certain relationships where you will yashin a person, but that person wouldn't yashin you, like a husband and a wife. He yashins his wife, but his wife doesn't yashin him, and therefore you have the opposite relationship as well. A wife is manchel to her husband, but she doesn't yashin from her husband. Then there are certain relationships that you don't yashin from them, and they don't yashin from you. What relationship is it two-way? Or a brother, sometimes a person can but it's just all these are person. The children of sisters, they are okay, wife to her stealing, they're manchil. So sons will yarshin the mother, but the mother will not yarshin the son. And if you have a brother that you share a mother with, you're yarshin anything from her mother with, and vice versa. He doesn't give me. Why would it first live? And I'll tell you two reasons why you should talk about the son you're asking the father. A is you're starting a pair talking about a tragedy where a son died in his father's life. That's not appropriate. The other problem we have is look at the pasuk. The pasuk seems to introduce the parsha of Yerusha discussing a son from a father. If someone dies, but if he had a son, the son would yarshin. So the very first introduction to the parsha is talking about a son yarshining a father. Zok Gemara, you know why the Tana talks about the father yarshining as a son? The Tana idea asle midrasha chavivalei. The halacha that a father yarshins a son, we learn out of a special drasha, and whatever someone learns out of a special drasha, it's always chavav to the Tana. So that was the information he wanted to present first. Okay, we'll stop here. We did a blot and a half today. Tomorrow we'll do a blot and a half as well. And then we would have done Yom Kippur's blot, so then we don't have to worry about Yom Kippur. Tomorrow we're gonna have to start. I don't know what time Slichas is, I'll have to look it up, but we're gonna start an hour before Slichas because we're at least 45 minutes before Slichas have to start. 45 minutes, otherwise, because tomorrow's not such a short daf. Tomorrow's already a little bit longer.